Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of Aron Nimzowitsch My System. The customary quote: "The pen is mightier than the sword." From the American chess master and writer Fred Grunfeld. His work included biographies on famous chess players including Aron Nimzowitsch. A brief review of the last part, where we continued our study of part 2 of the book, Position Play, and its first chapter, The Conception of Position Play and the Problem of the Center. We continued the discussion of combining overprotection with centralization and concluded the chapter after going through its last topic, the surrender of the center, with illustrations from Nimzowitsch. So now, moving further into the book, we will go through game number 25 of the illustrative game section of the book as recommended by Nimzowitsch at the end of the chapter in discussion. This game was played between Aron Nimzowitsch versus Walter Michel in the Semmering tournament in 1926 at Semmering, Austria. Walter Michel was a Swiss chess master who played in the first half of the 20th century. Nimzowitsch writes of the game as following: illustrates the idea of collective mobility and touches also on the problem of prophylactic. Nimzowitsch with the white pieces and Michel with the black. Notes by Aron Nimzowitsch. Knight f3, d5, b3, Knight f6, Bishop b2, c5, e3, and e6. Nimzowitsch writes, a new idea. Black avoids developing the knight at c6 since it might be pinned by Bishop b5. Knight e5, Knight d7, Bishop b5, and a6 question mark. Bishop d6 was much better here than the text move a6. Firstly, with regard to his development, and secondly because white threatens to make strong use of the diagonal b2 to g7, taking advantage of it to support his outpost at e5. A prophylactic measure was urgently needed. For instance, Bishop d6, Knight takes on d7, Bishop takes on d7, Bishop takes on d7 check, Queen takes on d7, Bishop takes on f6, G takes on f6, and the double pawn has both its dark and its bright side. Further, we consider Bishop e7 also better than the text move a6. So a6, Bishop takes on d7 check, Knight takes on d7, Knight takes on d7, Bishop takes on d7, castling, and f6, where Nimzowitsch comments, an admission of a weakness in the long diagonal. There came under consideration also Bishop d6 instead of f6, Queen g4, and Queen c7, followed by castling long. So f6, c4, and d takes on c4. The threat was c takes on d5, e takes on d5, Queen h5 check, followed by Queen takes on d5. As such, d takes on c4 was played by black, and play continued with b takes on c4. bishop d6, queen h5 check, g6, queen h6, bishop f8, and queen h3, double exclamation. Nimzowitsch writes, the best place for the queen, and one difficult to find, e5 would now only surrender the point d5 to white. For instance, e5, queen g3, threatening bishop takes on bishop takes on e5, bishop g7 and e4, followed by d3, knight c3 to d5 with advantage in position for white. So queen h3, bishop e7, knight c3, castling, and a4. White plans the configuration pawn at e4, pawn at f4, and so on, which would leave his d-pawn backward, as he thus sacrifices the effective power of his d-pawn. He must necessarily first paralyze the three black queenside pawns, hence the takes move. Bishop d6, f4, queen e7, e4, bishop c6, and g4. Nimzowitsch writes, a pawn roller which can hardly be rendered innocuous or not harmful or offensive. f5. If black does nothing, white has the choice between a direct attack on one hand and play against the c-pawn on the other. The latter could be carried out in some such way as, say, rook e8 instead of f5, queen e3, and then a5 and bishop a3, finally driving away the defending bishop at d3 by e5. After the takes move f5, a mating attack wins the game straight off. G takes on f5 and e takes on f5, or g takes on f5, then king f2, and so on. So e takes on f5 and e5. The following variation may be dedicated to those who love combinative complications. Knight d5 instead of e5. Queen takes on e4, rook e1. Queen takes on c4, knight e7 check. Bishop takes on e7, rook takes on e7, rook f7, rook takes on f7, queen takes on f7, queen c3, king f8, and black, it would appear, has a sufficient defense. So e5, bishop c7, knight d5, and bishop takes on d5. If on his 21st move here, black had played his bishop back to b8 instead of bishop c7, he would now have been able to answer the entry of the knight by queen e6 instead of bishop takes on d5. But this would avail nothing. For example, bishop b8, knight d5, queen e6, knight f6 check, rook takes on f6, e takes on f6, and queen e4 is one chance, f7 check, and white wins by king takes on f7, queen takes on h7 check, king f8, queen g7 check, king e8, rook e1, and so on. So bishop takes on d5, c takes on d5, queen d7, and e6, where black resigned the game. For if queen takes on d5, queen h6 forces mate or the loss of a rook. And if queen e7, the fatal queen plays to c3 and there is no answer. Next is game number 26 of the illustrative games section. This game was played between SEIGBERT TARRASCH versus JACQUES in 1916 at Berlin, Germany. Jacques was a German-born British chess player who played around the turn of the 20th century. He was awarded the International Grandmaster title in 1950 by FIDE. Nimzowitsch writes of the game as following. The following game shows how easily the early surrender of the center can lead to disaster. Nevertheless, this procedure seems to us to be in itself quite practicable, provided we bring to bear on the problem all the tenacity which we possess and do not allow ourselves to be forced down an inclined plane. If we do this, our prospects for the future are good. As examples, we may point to Rubinstein's games of this kind, which he won at San Sebastian in 1911, and further to game number 28 in this book. We now proceed. Tarrasch with the white pieces and Mises with the black. Notes by Aron Nimzowitsch. e4, e6, d4, d5, knight c3, and d takes on e4, where Nimzowitsch comments, giving up the center but opens the d file and the long diagonal b7 to h1 for pressure on white center. Knight takes on e4, knight d7, knight f3, knight f6, bishop d3, and knight takes on e4. Nimzowitsch remarks, better would be b6, but the text move knight takes on e4 is playable. Bishop takes on e4, knight f6, and bishop d3. If bishop g5, instead, bishop e7, bishop takes on f6, then best for black would be g takes on f6. But bishop d3 was played by white in the game, and play continued with b6, bishop g5, bishop b7, castling, bishop e7, queen e2, castling, rook d1, and h6 question mark. Nimzowitsch writes, the tenacity of purpose so necessary to tournament play fails him here. Why not a queen d5, if then c4, queen a5, followed presently by rook a to d8, and the pressure is already sensible. If, however, c4, queen a5, d5, then rook e8 with strong counter threats. For instance, d takes on e6 question mark, bishop takes on f3, followed by queen takes on g5. Why the mere contact with the point d5 must bring a blessing is evident. This point in the first place is the outpost station in the d file, and in the second, the same thing in the diagonal b7 to h1, while lastly d5 is a blockading point. The enormous strategical importance to black of the point d5 makes it clear that any, even the most passing, contact with it must work wonders. So h6, bishop f4 and queen d5. Now this move is unfavorable since the c-pawn is in the air or hanging. The inclined plane makes its appearance. c4, queen a5, bishop takes on c7 and bishop takes on f3. Instead, rook c8 was to be considered here, and after bishop e5 and rook d8, the advance of white's pawn majority is very much hindered. So bishop takes on f3, g takes on f3 and queen takes on a2 question mark. Black will not resign himself to the loss of a pawn, runs risks in seeking compensation, and thus loses the queen. With rook c8 instead of queen takes on a2, bishop e5 and knight d7, with a view to the threatened king h1 followed by rook g1, he could still have put up a resistance. For if then bishop e4, then knight takes on e5, bishop takes on a8, knight g6, and black threatens knight f4, leading to mate or win of the white queen. So queen takes on a2, rook a1, queen b3, bishop c2, queen b4 and rook a4, where black resigned the game. The queen is prettily trapped. Next is game number 27 of the illustrative game section. This game was played between Ernst Gruenfeld versus Savielly Tartakover in the Semmering tournament in 1926 at Semmering, Austria. Ernst Gruenfeld was an Austrian chess player and writer, mainly on opening theory. He was awarded the Grandmaster title in 1950 by FIDE. Nimzowitsch writes of the game as following. In a situation very similar to that in the preceding game, Tartakover succeeds in making the point d5, which Mises so badly neglected, the basis of an undertaking which he carries out with great virtuosity or artistic skill. Gruenfeld with the white pieces and Tartakover with the black. Notes by Aron Nimzowitsch. d4, d5, c4, d takes on c4, knight f3, bishop g4, knight e5, bishop h5 and knight takes on c4, where Nimzowitsch remarks the best answer to knight c3 instead of knight takes on c4 would be knight d7, and the proud knight at e5 will be forced to declare their intentions. So knight takes on c4, e6 and queen b3, threatening both queen takes on b7 and queen b5 check. Knight c6, e3 and rook b8. He does not hesitate at employing the rook to protect the modest pawn. Knight c3, knight f6, bishop e2, bishop takes on e2, knight takes on e2, bishop b4 check, knight c3, and a castling. Nimzowitsch writes, both sides have now completed their development and the game is about equal. But white's center, which is otherwise well protected, betrays a striking measure of immobility. My system, however, teaches that every immobile complex tends to become a weakness. The truth of the proposition will here be shortly manifested. Castling and knight d5. The knight feels here as if at home, for e4 is not possible because of knight takes on d4. Knight takes on d5. If instead knight e4, the result would be the mobilization of black's queenside by b5. Knight e5, knight takes on e5, d takes on e5, c5, a3, c4, and so on. Or knight d2 instead of knight e5, then e5, and so on, and white's game is disorganized. So knight takes on d5, queen takes on d5, queen c2, and e5. White's center is already being demolished. Knight takes on e5, knight takes on e5, d takes on e5, queen takes on e5, bishop d2, bishop takes on d2, queen takes on d2, rook d8, queen c2, and rook d5, where Nimzowitsch comments, he makes use of the point d5 in excellent fashion. Rook d1, rook d8, rook takes on d5, rook takes on d5, rook d1, g6, rook takes on d5, queen takes on d5, a3, and c5. Nimzowitsch writes, black has a decided advantage for the endgame, pawn majority on the queen side, and last but not least, the central position of the queen. This advantage is, however, still only a small one. h3 and b5. Centralization proceeds apace. White's pawn majority is much less easily realizable than black's. If, for instance, f3, then f5, and e4 is in bondage. And this is sufficient to explain the loss of the game. So b5, queen c3, c4, f4, queen e4, king f2, and a5. Nimzowitsch writes, the whole ending is played by Tartakover with wonderful precision and truly artistic elegance. Tartakover is, in my opinion, without question, the third best endgame artist of all living masters. g4, h6, h4, and queen h1. Only now, and this tardiness is to his credit, does he give up the central position in favor of a diversion. King g3, queen g1 check, king f3, queen h2, g5, h5, king e4, queen takes on h4, queen takes on a5, queen h1 check, king e5, and queen c6. in order on queen e1 to put in operation the following maneuver: queen c5 check, king e4, and queen f5 check, followed by queen c2, and black wins. So queen c6, queen a7, h4, and f5. White is already at his last gasp. Play continued with g takes on f5, king takes on f5, queen f3 check, king e5, h3, king d4, and queen g4 check, where white resigned the game. Alright, we conclude this part of Aron Nimzowicz's My System here. We shall continue onwards from the next one. Here is a look at the recent channel support from my Twitch stream. Some new supporters: OhSoSlowChess, neonseagull, starbux, heroic dose, bwayned, jesperlundthomsen, Harry Taylor, oenopionos, and ellipse. Thank you for the kind support, everyone. Much appreciated. Alright, till next time, take care.